Hello, class, and welcome to week 14 of Methods of Counseling. This is your final week of class, and I am so proud of each and every one of you for making it this far. I know that 14 weeks is a long time to be in one class, especially as y'all are doing other classes simultaneously. So I just want to say how appreciative I am to each and every one of you for persevering and always seeking excellence. And I'm excited to still have this one last week with you. So we're going to make it good. The videos today are going to be a recap from week 13 as well as kind of looking forward to week 14 because of course we're not going to have a video in week 14 because you guys will be done after this. So we're going to go through just a couple things. I'll try not to make it too long for y'all, and then of course I'll give you a resource at the end, and we will move into week 14 and then we'll be done. And again, this is exciting that you'll have made it so far, and this is a really great class that and I've enjoyed each and every one of you. So thank you so much for your participation. So we had a discussion question last week, and this week 13 and week 14 were actually my two favorite discussion questions because I feel like they demonstrate, or there's an opportunity to demonstrate just how much y'all have grown throughout this semester, just the different and newer perspectives that y'all have taken. Of course, my goal is never to necessarily change you, but rather to offer you greater perspectives. And I feel like the questions in the last couple of weeks have really kind of lent into that and just are an opportunity for y'all to share with your classmates just where you've grown and all of those sorts of things. So the question that we had for this past week was in regards to being a nouthetic counselor and being able to use different sorts of interventions. At the beginning of this class, many people were very strong in their convictions that using biblical counseling and biblical counseling methods were the only methods and the only effective methods that you might use when working with clients. And while that works for many people, it's been so interesting to see as we have worked through this class just the knowledge base that has expanded and just kind of the thoughts and patterns that have expanded as each of you have now kind of adopted some new counseling techniques and theories that are not necessarily Christian but kind of fall under that umbrella of all truth is God's truth. And so that's been really exciting to see and to watch y'all grow and to kind of embrace those resources, the concepts, the methods, the interventions, all these sorts of things that might not necessarily be Christian but can be definitely tailored to a Christian environment, or can really aid in you being a counselor who is a Christian in whatever population that you choose to serve. So again, my purpose in this class and really of this question is not to get y'all to change perspectives, but really to just grow and broaden your perspective of who you are as a therapist and the treatment modalities that y'all will be practicing from. So while I realize that this could be my own personal perspective, when we view God in His entirety, there is something really big that we get to lay hold to or lay claim to. I know throughout this entire class we have really kind of pushed that saying of all truth is God's truth, and I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing me say that, but I cannot get away from that concept because of how true I believe it to be and how foundational it is to me as an individual as well as a professional. And so one of the things that I've loved about this class and just the different things that we can bring to it is that as we look into that and kind of lean into that statement of all truth is God's truth, we are able to have our perspectives expanded significantly. And like I said, this might be my own perspective, but when we take nouthetic counseling at face value, there is a little bit of a limitation in the outside resources that you can use in order to best serve your clients. Now, that's not a knock against nouthetic counseling. It's just, it can be a personal preference, too, of just going, this is something that fits me or that it doesn't fit me. However, it goes without saying, as you guys have really kind of demonstrated this week, that sometimes nouthetic counseling only fits a certain demographic or clientele rather than being able to expand and reach many different people. And so really what I've tried to do is just help you guys build a base of resources in order to best equip you so that whatever modality of treatment that you decide to participate in, you will be able to do that out of the fullness of who you are and what's important to you. So, one quick note about nouthetic counseling, and this is where we have to be careful. And of course, I want to tread on this ground very lightly because I don't want to step on people's toes or knock any sort of nouthetic counseling. But a couple different things that I do want to just present to you as areas to consider is that sometimes the limited feature of nouthetic counseling can create a couple of different dynamics. First of all, it can lead to counseling being based on a person or a denomination's interpretation of Scripture. What I mean by that is somebody who considers themselves a nouthetic counselor. Again, that's somebody who is going to be practicing using exclusively the Bible in order to, as their textbook per se, in working with clients. You could imagine that how that is interpreted and then applied could be very different between somebody who is a Reformed evangelical counselor and somebody who is Presbyterian or Methodist or Southern Baptist. There's different theologies going on there of how things are interpreted and how things are faced. And so what can be difficult then about nouthetic counseling, even though we're based off of the Bible, there's a denominational interpretation behind it. And so that is something that could be confusing. Or take, for instance, many of y'all have heard of the term health and wealth gospel. So if you have somebody who subscribes to that belief, but yet they are followers of Jesus and they claim that the Bible is their source of truth, but yet health and wealth is kind of that lens through which everything else is filtered, you can imagine that what would be said in that session regarding biblical truth would be very, very different than somebody of a Southern Baptist or an evangelical church or a Catholic church or a Lutheran church. So that's just one thing that we need to be careful of. Also, in nouthetic counseling, there can be some confusion in regards to acts of sin committed against us and how we are to deal with that. Of course, forgiveness is very important, but sometimes nouthetic counseling can glaze over just the impact that somebody else's sin has on you. So, for instance, if you have a client who comes in who's been sexually abused by their father, of course, forgiveness is going to be a part of counseling, and that's more for the client than for anything else. But it is difficult to deal with cases like that when the Bible doesn't speak directly to that. And so then we're kind of left in this lurch of trying to understand what is the right or the biblical way to counsel this client when the Bible doesn't actually speak to that specifically. And what do you do with people like the abuse victim who has had a sin committed against them and is really struggling in that pain? And while prayer and forgiveness and healing and Scripture is all so important, are we minimizing the client and the client's feelings and what's going on by simply giving them spiritual disciplines to participate in? Maybe not. It's very much dependent upon the view that you subscribe to, but I just want to offer that as a consideration of limitations. Also, of course, there is a limitation in resources. What I mean by this is, like I said, nouthetic counselors are traditionally going to be based exclusively on the Bible, that the Bible is their textbook, that is their resource guide, their manual to how they're going to counsel. And as you guys have seen throughout this course, I have thrown resources at you from literally every end of the spectrum and everywhere in between, as we have taken a look at mindfulness and entertainment, books by spiritual contemporary philosophers, all sorts of theorists and therapists and those sorts of things. And so many of y'all have come back to me and said, wow, there's really some truth in there. And I love that, because when we operate under all truth is God's truth, it doesn't matter if it's a contemporary spiritualist or a Buddhist monk or Christian pastor, if it's true, we get to claim it, and that's what's so special. And it can be hard in a nouthetic counseling situation to not be able to utilize all of those resources, and to be a little bit limited in where you can go to for those resources. And that can be especially difficult, again, when the Bible does not speak to specific issues. And while this might seem a little bit out there, say, for instance, that you have a client who is struggling with masturbation. The Bible does not really spend a lot of time talking about that. Of course, in the Old Testament, there is Onan, who people will say, would. I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say that. It wasn't even that issue. He was definitely not being fair to his sister-in-law and trying to kind of go around what was the cultural value of that time. But sexual issues like that, the Bible doesn't necessarily speak to them. And so what do you do in that case? What are the resources that you can pull from? What about even biblical marriage? You think about marriage, and there's really only a couple scriptures that speak specifically to that question of who am I even supposed to marry. The Bible is very clear that says, do not be unequally yoked. That's kind of the prerequisite it gives for marriage. So how do you talk to a client about that when the Bible is a little bit limited in what it says specifically about marriage or who to marry? Now, of course, it talks about what a biblical marriage is. It talks about what a godly man or a godly woman is. But when that question comes of, who am I supposed to marry? How do I look for a partner? Those sorts of things, which is a very important question. The Bible doesn't have a lot of specifics to that. And so that's where, of course, we can, in a non-nouthetic counseling situation, we can reach out to those true resources and be able to pull from them and use that to help our client. I love what the Clinton text had to say, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it here. The goal of science in counseling is to acquire facts in order to advance knowledge, which results in more effective therapeutic interventions. And my friends, this is exactly what we have been talking about the whole semester. That when we have that umbrella of all truth is God's truth, and we are able to use whatever is true in our lives and in the world around us to really kind of serve our clients and counsel them and walk alongside them and give them support, that is effective therapy. And I love that. So that's just a little bit about our discussion this week. Now, next week in our discussion, we are going to be moving into what is my absolute favorite question for this class. I know there's going to be some controversy. That's why I created the question. But I think I also wanted to see your growth and just kind of where you're at from the beginning of the class until now. So what I've done is I've created a list of what I would call hard topics. So this is going to be alcoholism and addictions, abuse, bipolar affect or mood affect disorder, gender identity, homosexuality, violence in marriages, those sorts of things, assault with, violence or assault within marriage. So basically, the question, you have this list of topics and you need to pick two, and how might you use primarily Christian counseling interventions when you talk about issues that are typically very difficult to deal with. And as we answer that question, of course, this may or may not be a Christian client, but if we are using primarily Christian counseling interventions, I want you guys to start to tackle some of those hard issues and how you would address a client who comes into you and is struggling through this or is going through this or is having this happen to them. So I'm very excited to see what y'all come up with. So we're going to go ahead and pause the video here and we'll pick up in just a minute.